Hey everybody, Sue's here from Revelation Quilts. I have been playing around with a technique called Interleave, and I got this idea from Dr. Lorrie Cranor, who invented this technique, but I have come up with a variation of it, and I actually emailed her and got her permission to do this, so I'm super excited to show you what we're going to do. So check it out. So let's get started. To make this block, you will need 4 10-inch squares, and I'm just using my scraps. I'm going through my scrap bin, and the 4 squares that I choose, you want them to be super high contrast from each other. So you want each one to be able to stand out. You don't want them to blend at all. So I've chosen 4 scrap 10-inch squares from my pile, and now I'm just going to pair them up 2 by 2, and I'm just choosing what will give the highest contrast with each other. So I'm going to pair these 2 together. I'm going to put them right sides together, and then I'm just going to cut them in half. So we will get 4 rectangles that are 10 by 5 inches. So I'm just going to cut that in half, and my scraps aren't, I cut them at 10 inches, but they're not all perfectly 10 inches, and that's okay because we will end up trimming this up. So I'm just going to cut all of these in half. So I will have, like I said, 4 that are 5 by 10 inches. Like so. And then we are going to sew these together 1/4 inch down each side, not down each side, down one side of each of these. So let me go sew these together and I'll show you what it looks like. So here I've got my 4 squares. I've sewn them together, and I've pressed everything to the darker side, and you want to press everything to the dark side throughout this whole project. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the 2 squares that are alike, and I'm going to put them right sides together so that the opposite fabrics are facing each other, and this way your seams will nest too, and that will get them as straight as possible. So if you nest your seam all the way down as best you can kind of feel it with your fingers if it's nested or not. And I'm just going to do that to both of these so that they are on top of each other. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sew a tube with these. So I'm just going to sew 1/4 inch down both sides of each of these squares so that I will have a tube. So let me go sew these together like that, and I'll show you what that looks like when I'm done. Okay, so everything's sewn. I've sewn down both ends of this. So now if I were to open it up, I would have a little tube inside of there, just like that. I'm gonna lay it flat on my cutting mat, and then I'm gonna take a pencil or a pen or some sort of marking tool, and I am going to mark on, I tend to mark on the lighter square, but if you have a chalk pencil or something like that, you can mark on the darker square. And what you just want to do is make some sort of a design on one of these strips. And so you can make like a design like this where you go up and then back, or you can make a swirl like this, some kind of a wavy line, or you can just start down here and work your way up like this. It really doesn't matter as long as it's got some sort of curve or angle to it. So for instance, for this one, I'm just going to start down here and draw a line. I'm trying to get it dark enough so you can see it. I'm just going to do a little wave like this, just like that. Hopefully you can see that line that I've drawn. And for this one, I'm going to do the same thing on the green. Maybe I should use, I don't have my white pencil here, but I'm going to make it as dark as I can. And I'm just going to draw on this one as well I'll just draw a zigzaggy line, kind of like that. You can't really see it, but trust that I've done that. The next step is I'm going to cut along that line, but I'm not going to cut through both layers. I'm just going to pick up this very top layer, and I am going to cut through that top layer right along that line that I've drawn. And if you don't get it exactly on the line, that's fine, because it's not going to show. And keep in mind, these are right sides are together. So I have the wrong side facing up at me. And I'm just going to cut that like that. And then I'm going to cut this one the same along the line I drew. This one I kind of did at an angle like this. And like I said, I'm only cutting through one layer of fabric, not both, so you can see the other layer underneath. There we go. So now when I open these up, I'm going to get 3 panels with a zigzaggy end like this. This one's easier to see with the white. So this is what it's going to look like when it's all done. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to take this over to the ironing board. I'm going to turn it over and just make sure everything is ironed to the dark side. So let me go iron these and I'll be right back. So everything is ironed to the dark side. And so I've got these 2 panels, I guess you can call them, that with wonky ends like this. So I'm going to put one aside for now, and I'm going to take one of them, I'm going to turn it so the long side is facing toward me, and I am going to trim up one end so it's even. And so I'm just going to line a line of my ruler up to one of the seams so it's nice and straight along there, and I'm just going to trim up one end so it's straight, just like that. And then I'm going to turn over, since I'm right-handed, and I'm going to line up this line that I just trimmed with one of the lines on my cutting mat, or I should say line up the edge with one of the lines on my cutting mat. And I'm going to cut this into 1.5 inch strips. And so I just take my ruler, line it up right on there, and just start cutting away 1.5 inch strips. And you should be able to get, I believe, 6 1.5 inch strips out of this with a little left over. And whatever's left over is waste. And just keep going like this until you have your 6 strips. So I've got my 6 strips cut, and I'm just going to stack them starting at the left, my left, your right, one on top of each other, so they stay in the same order. And I'm just going to put those aside for now. And I'm going to take my second one. I'm going to do the exact same procedure with this one. I'm going to straighten up the edge first. It's kind of hard to see because I know my fabric is green. One of the fabrics is green, and so is my cutting mat. So I apologize for that. It's just how it worked out. I'm going to cut my straight edge so I have a nice fresh edge to start cutting with. I'm going to turn it over and start cutting on that straight edge and put that edge right up on a line of my cutting mat so I know that it's straight, and cut 1.5 inch strips all the way across until I have my 6 strips. And just keep going across. My green fabric is a tiny bit flimsy. It's not as thick as the other, but that's okay. And again, there's my strips. I'm just going to stack them up, keeping them in order. And I'm going to move them to the down by me. And I'm going to take the one I just had. So I've got my 2 stacks of strips that are 1.5 inches wide. The next step is I'm going to place these, I'm going to alternate them on my cutting mat. And I'm going to pick a line on my cutting mat, a line that goes vertically, and I'm going to line these strips up so that they all are along this line, so I can get the whole strip on the line, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to alternate like this, using a line on my cutting mat so that I know they're straight. And just set them up just like this. Oh, there we go. Make sure you remember what line you're using. And just alternate them, lay them out. So there I've got them all lined up, and I'm looking at the curvature of the way it's curving, and it kind of looks like they're all curving the same way. And so I'm going to turn half of them over and see if that makes a difference. I don't know if this makes sense, but I'm just going to switch these around, make sure they're lining up on the same line. And it kind of just depends on what kind of line you drew originally. I'm going to see if this makes a difference if I take half of them and flip them over. And I think it will make a difference because of the way I drew my original lines. So you can play with these and see if you like them the way that you originally cut, or you can flip them over. So this makes it look a little bit different. Not a lot, a little bit, and that's okay. So whatever line you've chosen to line these up by, I'm just going to take my ruler and line it right up on that line. And I'm going to cut right along that line. So I will have a nice straight edge out of all of these when I sew them together. So there's my little pieces, all my little ends. So this is what my block's gonna look like when I sew them together. So now I'm just gonna pick them up, starting at one end and just stacking them on top of each other like this. And I'm gonna take them over to my sewing machine. I'm gonna sew all of these together with a 1/4 inch seam. And so I know that the one that's on top will be at the top, and I'll just go along and just sew them all together. And so let me show you what that looks like all sewn together. Here you can see I've sewn them all together, and I spent a good amount of time pressing this so it's nice and flat. You'll want to press it so that all of your seams go in one direction. Here they are all going in the same direction. And I started by pressing the back and just working those seams up and getting them nice and flat. And then I turned it over and I pressed it from the front, and I used some water in a spray bottle to make sure that I could get them nice and flat, because there are a lot of seams in here and you just want something nice to work with. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to trim it up, and it's going to be a little weird and wonky just because you've sewn so many strips together, but that's okay. We're just going to line it up on our cutting mat, and I'm just going to line it up along a cutting line, and I just want to cut a straight edge and just get the bottom or the top even as best you can with a line on your cutting mat. Because as long as these two sides are straight, then it's going to be okay. So I'm going to line that up, and I'm just going to cut a nice straight edge along here. And then I'm going to turn it around, and I'm going to take that edge that I've just cut and line that up with another line on this side of my cutting mat. So I know that that is a straight edge. And then I'm going to take my ruler again and find a line that works on this side so I can get all of my corners and angles in here. And I'm going to use this line here. And how much you cut off will really just depend on the angles that these ends are cut at. So if you cut on a slight curve, then you will not have to cut off as much. So here is our block. It's so pretty and so cute. And this one ended up about 15.5 inches. Some of them ended up being 16 inches, but I'm just going to take all of them that I've made, and whatever the shortest one is, that's the length I'm going to cut them all at, so that all of my blocks are the same size. But this is the block, and I just think it's so cute. Let me check the height. It's 12 inches. So about 12 by 15.5, 12 by 16, just depending on how you've cut your blocks. Now I've got quite a few of them made, and they're just so cute. The way they all are just a little different. The angles are a little different on them. They really, somebody told me they remind them of DNA, which is kind of cool. I just love that idea. So if I wanted to, I could stop here. I could stop here and I could just make this awesome set of placemats, which would be pretty cool. Just put a little border on these and you could have a fantastic set of placemats. But what I think I'm going to do with these is I could join them all together so these rows would extend down, and that would look amazing. But it might be kind of hard to match up all of these lines so they look like one continuous line. So what if I were to put just a little bit of sashing in between each one and put them up on my design wall? Let's take a look and see what that would look like. So this is kind of a representation of what it would look like with just a tiny strip of sashing in between. And I really like this. And the reason I really like it is because it still allows continuation of the pattern without having to sew the actual blocks together without a sashing. So what I did is I cut strips of 1.5 inches of just a gray color, very neutral gray color. But it still kind of gives you this impression that the pattern is still continuing, even though there's sashing in there, which I really, really like. And that eliminates the need to actually have to match up seams, trying to sew these little strips together, these blocks together, the strips within the blocks, you know what I mean? So I like this idea, and I think I will continue this. A whole quilt like this would be amazing. Right now I've got 9 blocks made, and I can make as many as I want. I just have to find some more bright fabric. All the rest of my 10-inch scrap squares are more muted colors, so I'm gonna look into my yardage and see what I can find there. I'm sure I have something. Duh, everybody's got a big stash. So I'm going to continue going. I'm not sure how big I'm going to make this, but I'm pretty sure this is what I'm going to do because I think this is turning out pretty cool. And so I'm just going to keep making these, and when I get them all together, I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so here is the final quilt top, all finished. I put that 1.5 inch sashing in a neutral gray in between each block. Each particular block measures 12 inches by 15.5 inches. I ended up trimming all of them down to fit the size of the smallest block that I had, so that worked out really well. I did a 5-inch border in the same color of that neutral gray around all of the edges. That way my colors and my patterns just stand out. I have a friend that says this reminded her of DNA, the double helix of a DNA. So we're going to call this quilt Double Helix. I think it's pretty fantastic. I really like it, and I'm really excited. Now the measurements of this quilt ended up to be 57 by 71. And so it's a good size lap quilt or throw. And I think it turned out really great. I absolutely love how it turned out. I want to send a special thank you to Dr. Lorrie Cranor for giving me permission to show this and teach this variation of her original design. I will leave a link to her website where her original instructions for her interleave quilts are, and then you can enjoy this variation also, so you can get a double bang for your buck. I will have this as a written pattern. It's not been written yet, but I will have it, and you can pre-order this on revelationquilts.com. Look for that pre-order, and that will become available to you. If you enjoy my content, I'm so pleased that you're here. Please like it, share it, and subscribe. Special thanks to all of the members of this channel. Your extra support means a whole bunch to me, and I'm super grateful for that. Don't forget to grab your t-shirts at TeePublic under Revelation Quilts. That's my store. I also have a link to that in the description. There's just hundreds of awesome quilting designs to choose from, and so I know there's one just for you. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to share in the comments. I try to get to every single one and at least acknowledge you. So I thank you for your support, and until next time, happy quilting.